Hi there, everybody. I am here with my relatively new and young friend, Kyle. Little feedback, Kyle went to school at...
Walkersville High. I was at Walkersville Middle and Late Elementary before that. I'm Frederick, born and bred, essentially.
And he kind of falls in the middle, I think, of my Josh, who graduated in 13. Did you graduate in 14?
I did graduate in 14,
And then
yes.
Bethany graduated in 15. So he's kind of grown up with my kids, but I didn't meet him until I started grappling with Jiu Jitsu.
Jiu Jitsu brings people together.
It does. I was actually telling him before as we were starting, and I'm explaining how this Facebook Live together would go. I was like, okay, we got to sit kind of close so that we're both in. He's like, we grappled together.
Yeah.
It's nothing like kind of like teaching me to choke or
that's
something.
It's a little different.
Yeah. So this is safe close. If you hear noise in the background, it's probably my naughty Morky Jasper begging for attention. Since I titled my work SilentNoMore, I think Jasper's really living up to that by trying to not be silent. So if any of you do follow much of my Facebook, you may have seen that about, I guess, maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago, I posted something asking if anyone would like to share their own stories about going through mental health crisis in their families of any kind. And Kyle reached out and said, I'd like to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
seem interesting. Why not try to help out and reach out to someone? Maybe if I can get to at least one person, I'd feel like that would be helpful.
That was really awesome. And I felt blessed because something that we both have in common, although I'm currently being treated and doing very well. Oh, by the way, this is asking me if I want to tag Sean Dennis. This is not my future son-in-law. This is just some other guy with a beard and light hair.
Apparently I look like some people.
So, anyway, when it comes to dealing with mental health crisis, sometimes it's a loved one in your family and you're dealing with the effects of that. And that's what Kyle had shared with me, and we talked about him sharing what that experience has been like, right?
Yeah. I was sort of, I guess I still am, in a weird situation where several of my family members have mental ailments of some sort, be it depression, anxiety, or bipolar disorder, and I never was diagnosed with one. I sort of had to spend most of my life going through this, not fully understanding what was going on or why. So it took a while until I sort of broke out into the world and was on my own to actually recognize that some of the things that I was going through weren't necessarily typical for most young adults going through middle school, high school, and just really 13 years.
Yeah. We were talking about something where he had shared, he'd go visit a friend in middle school years probably, and be at their house and be like, wow, it's not like this family or that family. Our family doesn't function like this. Right?
Yeah, that was something pretty big, actually. I remember I would go over to a friend's house, and from a young age I was always pretty observant, so I would always sort of watch how things worked, and then I would think about how things worked necessarily in my family and how I was supposed to act or generally do things, and seeing how it was different. I was trying to figure out, well, why is this happening? Why are they all gathering around at this time instead of just food's here?
Like dinner.
Eat. Yeah.
So a family would sit down and have dinner together, and you'd be like, wait, my family can't really do this.
There was days like that, as well as whenever we did have a get-together type dinner, it was sort of no talking, really, as compared to other families that I've seen where there's been just laughter and excitement and all these other things. But I mean, looking back, I remember it being fairly quiet, and I would just eat as fast as I could and get out of the warpath, essentially.
Right. So looking back now, you're a young adult. So if you can look back at the Kyle, you get to see yourself at 11, 12 years old, and that 11, 12-year-old Kyle thinks that something's not quite right, doesn't know what it is. What do you tell him to make him feel better on a hard day? Knowing what you know now.
I mean, the realist in me tells me it isn't fair. It isn't right that you got played the hand that you did. But to continue to have things to look forward to and goals to what it is you want necessarily in your life. Whenever you feel there's a time that it might seem hopeless, or it might seem like nothing's really going right, having goals in mind for what you want to accomplish in the future, it ends up helping a lot. And yeah, that's probably what I'd say.
And, I'm looking like while we're talking, I can see some men who I know on here who've joined in. And for any of you guys that are on here watching, feel free to drop in a comment. But something that dawns on me, I think, because I'm talking to a young man who shared an experience as a boy, and is still a very young man. And some of you watching this are fathers. The opportunity you have, if we open our eyes, those of us who are parents, to really put loving arms around that person, that young person, where our homes are welcome, where we don't even realize people are watching sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't realize people are watching, or I didn't when my kids were younger, that maybe my home was a safe place, or maybe some friend was that to you, where it's another home.
Yeah, I did have a few friends like that. Specifically, my one friend and his family, who I was actually the best man at his wedding and all that. They were very supportive to me. In the last few years they were here, they ended up moving before we graduated from high school. But pretty much up to that point, I got closer and closer with this individual, and they did sort of, I guess, recognize that things weren't necessarily the greatest in my home environment, and I don't know if they did it intentionally, or maybe it was just that natural occurrence of they reached out, and I'm very, very thankful for them, for several different reasons. So that's definitely something that has happened. Like, when I was younger, I wouldn't have known that people were looking out for me in the way that they were.
Yeah.
So it was very, very looking back, very thankful for that.
Yeah, I know if anybody's on here now that knows my kids, or if any of you are not, I know sometimes some of my kids' friends who are like your age, and in that they'll call me Mama Dose, like mom number 2. And it's taken getting a little further removed, where my kids are grown, or realizing that there's a good chance that I was in some way able to be a loving mom figure for someone that was struggling. And I really appreciate that, because I had struggles growing up, and realizing things weren't the same at my home as they were at other people's homes. And I know when Kyle and I have shared, we had a lot in common. I'm old enough to be his mom, but he could have he's describing certain things at times of growing up, and I'm like, man, it sounds like he was a fly on the wall in my home 25 years ago or 30 years ago, and there's an understanding there. I read this somewhere, and you guys, you'll hear it sometimes when I say it, which I told him before. I heard, or I read a quote, and I am going to find it, figure out where it originated, because it's not mine, as much as I would love to take credit. It says, when you live in an asylum, crazy is normal. And for husbands and wives that are in a marriage where someone is dealing with bipolar disorder or alcoholism, or they're suicidal, or they're just whatever that is, maybe they're just toxic. Or in your case, it happened in your family, and that becomes your normal. And you go to someone else's house and like, why is their normal so much more pleasant than my normal? Why does their normal give me the warm fuzzies, but the normal in my home is I have this tension I can't explain. I want to go, like, for me, I would go in my room and write poetry or just disappear. And yours, what did you do?
I played a lot of video games is what I did. And honestly, I kind of wish I would have gotten out of the house more, thinking back, because I feel like it would have made things a lot easier for me. Because, I would get home and I just would want to isolate myself from the rest of the world. Whenever I was at home, I didn't really want to be there. I wanted to be at school, even if at school I was going through things that were still irritating. Or when I got to the point where I was working, I wanted to be at work rather than actually at home, because as I got older, I started to notice that this wasn't necessarily normal, aside from me, because I had been raised and grown up in that environment. But when I got like this little glimpse of, hey, it's not normal to be screamed at for the most small thing, or it's not normal to be abused or whatever it is that's going on normally in your every day-to-day life, I sort of clamored for the opportunity to not be in the environment where my normal was going to be set in necessarily for me down the line, especially for whatever future that I have with my future significant other or future children and so forth.
And I mean, you're smart, because you could have been doing a whole lot of avoiding outside of video games. But for you adults, I think this is something, although this isn't, I didn't envision that this is what I would think of in talking to Kyle, but I think because he is so close to my children's ages, and as he describes himself, I see the teen Gretchen and what he says about himself. I remember my friends whose parents took me somewhere to hang out with them, and what a difference that makes. And for some of our kids or some kids that our kids are playing with, their escape is hanging out with our kids.
Yeah.
It's that, or it's a video game, or it's drugs, and which are very easy to find. You could tell me if this is true. I remember I think it was Bethany, who he knew too, but Bethany's 22. I think she's age 22, but in wisdom like 40. She's just super smart and wise. But I remember her telling me when she was like 14 or 15, she just kind of sadly was making this observational comment about high school. She's like, I've never touched a drug. I don't want to touch a drug, but I think I can name all of the drug dealers at school. Do you think that's pretty accurate?
It was definitely, like, looking back, you could tell who was into that type of stuff. And, I mean, it was fairly well known. It was like cliques in high school.
Yeah. It's like you could see, like, the escape you chose. Thankfully for you, that wasn't a temptation for an escape. But if someone else is having those same struggles and that's going to be their temptation, what an awful difficulty for that. You know?
It's really hard. And the reason it wasn't a necessarily escape for me was I had a older sibling who decided to go down that path. And seeing how it has impacted them and seeing how it has impacted some of my friends who has also gone down that path, it's not something I've ever really wanted. I mean, I've seen how it can really destroy people from the inside out, and that's not something I ever wanted, especially because my goals, even from a young child, was like I wanted to have a stable family. I wanted to have be like a good father figure to my own children and all that. So
you're pretty self-aware at a pretty young age. So video games are pretty safe compared to the many options someone has when they're trapped in a toxic home environment. Something he has, which, do you mind if I have you show your tattoo and describe what it is?
Sure.
So this is what I was saying. Like, I think it's the coolest thing. So what is this?
So this is a tattoo.
I'll put it here. There you guys go.
It says Boys to Men. It's for a mentoring network.
Yeah.
For young men, and there's also another group for young women. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's for young men who do not have like stability in their home life, or father figures, or reliable father figures in their home life, and so forth. And it sort of breaks this social barrier or like the social, I guess what's the word? The social standard of when you're a man, you don't show emotion. You don't. You have to be strong all the time, and all these other things. And it sort of takes that away, and it shows that it's okay to feel your emotions. I mean, not everything's going to be peachy green, and you're not going to have to shove everything downward. That there are people you can talk to, and it's okay to feel angry, sad, whatever it is that's going on in your life. And that was very helpful for me growing up, because it gave me this outlet as well from like, video games and talking to friends. I got to help people that were coming into this program, as well as learn and grow with other men that were wanting this. How
did you find it? Like, how did this become something you did in your life?
So it became something that I started doing from my older sibling. His biological father took his own life, and because of that, he got into it through my mother, and then as he got through it, it seemed fairly helpful to him in some aspects, and so I got into it as an end result as well. And I would say that it impacts people differently. Like, it's sort of one of those situations where you can take a lot of people to a specific training, and some people will get more out of it than others will, or some people will get a specific point out of it than others will. Like, for some people, it's just, oh, this is a place where I can hang out and be away from the world. For me, I tried to use it as a place to better understand what this whole normal situation was and why certain things were happening and so forth. But it was a really big, impactful thing on my life, so that's why
I think it's really special. Like, if you guys have watched this from the beginning, or if you're just tuning in, I just kind of recap in case so you're learning, like, it's so much information to learn what you've gone through in such a short period of time at that stage of your life. You've got certain toxic things happening in your household. Your big brother, whose father is different than yours, takes his own life. And this is the same big brother who struggles with addiction?
He struggles with using drugs, yes, and other ailments that I would say, like bipolar disorder, as well as depression.
So, like, mental illness is definitely, it's like right there. So a program like this is giving you a very healthy...
It's definitely a very good outlet, but at the same time, with that whole situation, it also applies to not wanting to take medication or not seeking help. So it's sort of a very hard thing to really dig into.
Yeah. But I mean, in short, at least on that side of Kyle's story, at some point, something made a difference for this Boys to Men program that it's enough he's going to have it permanently on his arm unless he recovers that.
It's actually, it's pretty big down in
thing.
Richmond,
Really?
actually. Yeah, in Richmond, Virginia, they have it in San Diego. They have it a large amount over there. They have some people in Vancouver. Like, it's very widespread. So I was very lucky, though, because it was sort of in the beginning steps that I was still able to get into the program, and I would love to see it expand more.
That's right. You can get involved, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to actually do my best to.
So, and, we'll dig a little bit more on what Kyle's experience is now, but, to think about those of us who are adults right now, including Kyle, because now he's not a child, he's a young adult who's still navigating the crazy that was once normal. A lot of us are in a place to help in some kind of way, whether you can be a CASA volunteer for foster kids, a big brother, big sister with the big brother, big sisters programs, this Boys to Men program. There's so many mentoring programs that are available, and most are desperately needing people to help people who are like us. I was that girl who was hurting that really benefited from usually someone's mom teaching me things without even them intentionally teaching me. I would learn how to talk to people, how couples should argue if they're going to argue, how parents should discipline their children without being harsh and yelling or screaming or overreacting. And you learn that too, apparently.
Yeah, I learned a lot through several different things. Like, I guess one of the big things I learned was that, I mean, especially if you're like arguing with somebody, you're going to end up saying hurtful things, but if you sort of don't escalate it, and you try to rationalize it more, it can be still infuriating for one person, but if you try to really dig into the problem rather than screaming and shouting about it, I've learned that it's much better to just be rational and calm and collected about whatever it is and try to suggest multiple perspectives to see what could be solved in that situation.
Oh, yeah. I've been really guilty of being what the pastor at my church actually calls it. He called it, like, in a sermon time, a last worder.
Yeah.
So, but I grew up that way. Everyone wanted the last word, and, you would think an argument's over because you thought everybody covered their bases, and there's one person getting that last jab in to cut deeper over and over again. And eventually, whether it's to convince someone that they're mistaken, or that you didn't do, or you did do this, or you meant this or that, sometimes getting the last word is just not necessary. And that's been like my biggest hard thing to learn. Sometimes it's gotta, so what if they think I'm wrong? I'm gonna walk away. But that's hard.
Yeah, I struggle with that even today. Like, I'll be arguing with people and be like, how can you not see it this one way? And then they'll tell
what's
me
wrong with you people?
Yeah,
Don't you know I'm right?
It's I mean, if you just looked at it from my perspective, obviously you could see.
The sky is actually green. I know you think it's blue, but it's green. But No, but there's a type of arguing that is toxic, damaging, destructive, even abusive. And then there's arguing where people feel loved, heard. Even if they don't feel understood in the moment, they can still feel like you want to understand. Mm-hmm. And when crazy is the normal of our environment, and by crazy, I'm not trying to toss around a word to be insulting. I mean, when it's always fighting and there's suicide becomes a normal part of something that someone in your family faces. That's not a healthy normal. It's painful and it's a reality. Yeah. But when that's entered your household, it's a painful thing to deal with. When substance abuse, whether it's a substance abuse disorder, aka addiction, or recreational damaging use, when you have someone who compulsively lies and steals, or someone who just doesn't care about whether you're living in a healthy environment, it hurts people. And so that's what I mean by the crazy. I'm not talking about someone doesn't agree with me, which, by the way, isn't that crazy? That someone doesn't agree with me? No?
Maybe.
I was waiting for him to give me the right answer. So, and I would say, like, on everyone's end, having some kind of outlet. I personally have a very low dose medication, which is helping me get through my PTSD treatment, and it's extremely low. I know some people have a much more serious case of depression than anything I ever experienced. And then there are some that have been on medication and aren't anymore, which looks like that's where I'm headed. Some will never need medication. But medication doesn't fix the constant turmoil of the mind. Having constructive things to do does. Like, so we met doing jiu-jitsu. I'm sticking with it because it's helped me address anxiety head on. What made you do that? Is it just fun?
Well, so I learned pretty quick when I was going through the whole wanting to get out of my current home situation by isolating myself with work or whatever it was, that some things I would do would actually be enjoyable. And so I got into more exercising, like running for a while I was training to go into the military is something that I did. As well as I started lifting, but then I kept getting injured on my shoulder, and so I started doing jiu-jitsu, and it's this weird meditative state that I get into that no matter how bad problems are going on in my life, I sort of have that taken away when I'm in this mindset of, oh, please don't choke me.
Yeah.
And, but I mean, like, there's also other things, like on occasion I'll listen to music, or I'll sometimes even draw or journal, or just little things that sort of help me take a step back from all the larger aspects of my life that could be closing in. And another one for me, especially as an adult, is actually isolating things that could be triggers, like isolating toxicity from my life. So if there's a way that I can limit individuals that would otherwise cause anger or distress in some way in my personal being, even if it's someone that I very much care for, I try to limit that to a point where I'm not going to be affected in such a negative manner where it would be tearing me down the entire day or the entire week and so forth.
You're way ahead of the game learning that, because I could tell you I didn't learn that till I'm almost 45, and it's been a really short time. And I call it boundaries. And it is a sort of an isolating, like, this is, it's actually the hardest thing I think I've ever done is take the notion that someone I love very, very much, is actually somewhat harmful to me and relating to me. And I need to very sternly limit my interactions so that they can't harm me anymore. And also so that I cannot enable them in that harming. And I know when we've talked, you've had some of that similar thing.
There's some things that go on in my life that I try to limit that. And it's also a strange thing because I think if it hasn't been established fairly firmly for a while, and then you install this like new boundary system, that it becomes sort of like an offensive thing to the people that you're setting these boundaries for. And it's
especially at first.
Yeah, and it's not meant to be hurtful. It's not meant to be like demeaning or make that person think that, oh, I don't value your opinion or anything like that. It's just this personal pretty much observance and perspective, saying, I know that these specific things will lead to so and forth, and I'm trying to avoid that as much as I can. So,
and and just it could just be even in a relationship. Like, so my husband and I are married and we love each other very much, but we both have bad habits in communicating with each other, and we both have found ways to lovingly not be toxic in our fighting. So like, I might say, I'm really ticked off right now. I need at least an hour, and then he'll ask, when can we revisit the conversation? So maybe I'm thinking, if I need at least an hour, let's talk in 2 hours. That means I set a boundary, and actually he probably does feel isolated for 2 hours because I don't want to talk, but also that gives me 2 hours to process, to think, to not react, to not be mean, and for him to think it's not really a matter of fault, but what happened here? What went wrong? How can we make this right? But if you always attack things head on, it sucks. Now, in a marriage, that's what we have to do. But for some of you, it could be a relationship with a sibling, with a parent, with a kid, with a friend, with a neighbor, with someone you really care about, and say, you know what, for right now, at least for right now, the best thing is to not engage with this person. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, I'm actually currently going through that right now with one of my siblings.
That's hard.
It is, because I care a lot for them and I want the best for them. But there's so many things that keep happening that, again, I've just had to set this boundary of I can't do this one thing. Like, I care for you greatly and I want you to do all these amazing things, but you keep doing this one thing that is sort of it's hurting more than just yourself. Essentially, it's hurting not only myself but also others that care greatly for you and are wanting the best for you. So that's very hard, as well as, like, for my other sibling, I'm trying my best to just be a good person and sort of show them that, I mean, I'm not perfect, and I don't expect them to be perfect. Just like
That's
I don't really expect
I thought he was
anyone
perfect.
to
No
be.
more talking.
No, not at all. Sorry. But like, essentially, like, I want them to know that it's okay to have your own flaws. Absolutely. And like, not everything is so cut in stone as I sort of used to think when I was in the environment that they are going through and so forth. So it's a very strange thing for me, because I'm trying to be this, like, teacher of sorts, but I'm also still learning a lot. So I don't really, it's sort of like the blind leading the blind in a way.
The beautiful thing is having a teachable spirit. I think I was about Kyle's age, maybe a little younger. This lady, she's from Scotland. She was like the coolest, tough. These days we totally say badass, but I promise you, we were not saying that like in 1994. I don't know when that became the thing to say, but this lady, that's exactly what she was. And she would have these women's groups of like almost 24 of us in her living room every week, of young women like your age, except now here I am all these years later. And I always had all these questions. And one time she said, Gretchen, you have bitterness toward, I won't name the person, but toward a person in my life, and you need to ask them for forgiveness. And I was like, but you don't know what they've done. And she goes, you're right. I don't know what they've done. You own the fact that you've been bitter, and then everything else is on them. So I was like, wow, that was hard. So I called this person, and because I was like, okay, I'm sorry, because I have harbored all of these angry feelings for years. I didn't even give you the benefit of letting you know I'm angry. But you need to know that this is what happened. Now, the truth is that person didn't own their responsibility on the side, but I actually did feel freer.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, she was right. So if someone harms you, maybe calling isn't the easiest thing. I'm not sure texting is either, by the way. Writing a letter, the good old-fashioned letter, like where your hand hurts, because we don't do that anymore. So like these muscles, unless you grapple, you hold on those keys really tight. Anyway, good old-fashioned letter sometimes is like, I've been harboring this hurt, and I'm not going to say one of us is guilty or whatever, but this happened, and I've been angry for a long time, and I'm sorry I didn't give you the benefit of letting you know I'm angry about this. Now, that person didn't own it, but now I don't have to own unspoken anger. And I go back and I tell Morag, I did it and I do feel better, but I'm hurt because they spent all this time hurting me and I just wanted them to acknowledge something. And she said, I told you, their responsibility is what they own. You own what you own. But she told me something which I see you have. Is she's like, you have a teachable spirit. Never lose that. And you could see that because you're like, I have a whole lot to learn. And you're trying to be this good brother while you have to have this other boundary. So you're doing what you should do. And as soon as you think you got it all figured out, you find out you don't have it all figured out. You have a lot less figured out than you thought. Or like an onion, you just cut another layer and you didn't realize how ugly it was under there, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty much nail on the head.
But being teachable like the whole way through. If any of you guys are watching this and maybe you're an aunt, an uncle, a big brother, a little brother, something, and you know that there's a really serious crisis in your family. You know someone is an addict and they're not getting help. You know that there's some kind of emotional or physical abuse that's not getting addressed. Maybe you've got a manic, depressive, or addicted parent who's not getting help and you don't feel safe. I would beg any of you right now, like we get off of this call, this Facebook Live, and dial 211 in almost everywhere in the United States, definitely here in Maryland. You're not going to have sirens coming blazing. There's not going to be a fire truck and an ambulance and all that. Did you even know that existed?
No.
No? So it does. So now I'm telling him something. I didn't know that until long after my family experienced the mental health crisis that really almost cost my son his life. You know, and here I was for years reaching out, like grasping for straws. Maybe if I just take him to this place to get help, it'll work. Or maybe if I just homeschool him, it'll get him help. Or maybe if he just had different friends, if we do this. And I had no idea that I could dial 211, someone from literally my local mental health association could get connected with me right away. I could explain what was happening and get an appointment on the books.
Yeah, I did not know that at all.
And I tell him that, so now he knows. He can dial 211. It's a very helpful resource. So the first time I ever used it, about this November will be 2 years ago, I had taken in a teenager, a Walkersville High School student who had a baby. She had a fight with her little sister. The little sister is like, I'm going to show her. So she dials 911. Well, the one with the baby is 18 years old. That meant she's charged as an adult. Can't go back home, even with the baby, till after court. Even now, to a lot of you, this is something you handle in your family. It wasn't an abuse situation, but police are doing the right thing by saying, okay, this minor has to be safe. So we took in this 18-year-old with her baby. Actually the next day, my stepdad passed away.
Oh, wow.
And he's a daddy to me. So I fly to Mississippi, but I've got this girl in crisis at my home. She was here, probably sitting on this couch that I'm on right now. And I didn't know what to do, but I remembered someone told me about 211. Now I thought, because I had a Maryland phone number, that if I dial 211, it's going to link me to Maryland. Well, I was in Mississippi, and it linked me to the Mental Health Association or a local resource in Mississippi. And they're like, whoa, let us connect you to where you need to be. So I call this number, 211. They connect me in Mississippi. They contact who I need to contact in Maryland.
Wow.
And within an hour, I'm able to help this young girl set up her first therapy appointment.
Wow.
And it really is that easy. And I tell you guys that with Kyle, because I know he loves his siblings and he cares about himself. And sometimes in the military, we may have heard it like adapt and overcome. You're in a crappy circumstance. Like I did that. My phone is propped up on a bunch of books because my computer's not working. So I had to adapt and overcome. It isn't the ideal circumstance for a video, but that's what I did. But mental health isn't like that. We spent our childhoods adapting and overcoming, but not in a good way. As children, we shouldn't have to figure out what is the best thing for our mental health. As an adult, and some of you if you're teens, we have an opportunity through a resource like 211. You can inbox me if you would like. I'm more than happy to direct you to resources that I've been blessed to create alliances with. And if you need a friend, hey, look, if you're a young guy in Frederick, or a young lady, come meet us over at the fort and do some Brazilian Jiu Jitzu and make some friends.
Great people there too.
It is. You'd be amazed by the people in many different sports things. I've done natural bodybuilding and lifted more like a power lifter back then. Now I do jiu-jitsu, but in various fitness world, especially in martial arts, which I'm finding is it doesn't matter what you look like, where you're from, if you go to church, where you go to church, if you're almost ginger-like or blonde-like like this guy, or like
definitely
obvious.
a mixture.
Yeah. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. We all got blood running through our veins, and we got something we can do. So some of us don't need necessarily a mental health therapist. We just need an outlet to do something healthy, and maybe that's what you need. But if you're in crisis, I do hope you'll call 211. And if you love someone that's in crisis and you don't know who to call 211. If you just want to talk to someone that you'd like to understand, feel free to inbox me. Anyway, I look forward to talking to some more of you, and I'm really appreciative that Kyle joined us here.
Oh, well, thank you
and
very much for having me.
And he's an awesome young guy. Bye. Oh, I gotta ask this. This is like totally the appropriate thing. I'm not interested. I'm married, and he could be my son. But are you single?
I am.
So there's some young lady here, or there's some mom, I just wish that my daughter could find a wonderful young man. Look at this. Sweetheart. Had to do that. So I've never done that before.
I feel honored.
Anyway, you guys take care. Have a super blessed rest of your week. And I'll see Kyle on the mats after the Mrs. International pageant. And hopefully I'll see you all in a few days in my next Facebook Live. Bye.